In a grand banquet hall lit with golden chandeliers, powerful men and women from around the world gathered, their laughter echoing like thunder. Among them was a Chinese billionaire known for both his immense wealth and his arrogance. As Silver. Trays glided through the room. A young black waiter quietly carried out his duties, unnoticed by most. But then the billionaire's mocking words cut through the air, drawing the attention of every guest. He thought the waiter was beneath him, someone unworthy of respect. The crowd chuckled, waiting for the humiliation to unfold. Yet no one could have predicted the moment that followed. What would you have done if you were in that waiter's place? Comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss these powerful stories that expose arrogance, racism, and the strength of those underestimated. The story begins inside an opulent five-star hotel in the bustling heart of Shanghai. Business elites, investors, and wealthy heirs filled the glittering banquet hall where a global conference was underway. The chandeliers sparkled, the tables were lined with crystal glasses, and the air carried a mix of expensive perfumes and arrogance. Among the crowd of powerful figures, one man stood out, an extremely wealthy Chinese billionaire, notorious, not just for his riches but for his unbearable pride and cruelty. He thrived on mocking others, using humiliation as his form of entertainment. While others laughed along, no one dared to confront him, for his influence was far-reaching. On this particular evening, as the billionaire sat surrounded by allies and admirers, his sharp eyes landed on a waiter, a young black man, quietly moving from table to table, serving food with professionalism and dignity. To the billionaire, he was not a human being but a target, someone to ridicule before an audience. The young man carried trays with steady hands, but his silence and calm demeanor seemed to trigger the billionaire's cruelty. He cracked a joke, at his expense, making the entire room erupt with laughter, using race as the weapon. The waiter stood there, holding his composure, while humiliation burned beneath the surface. What the billionaire didn't know, however, was that the very man he mocked held a secret that would silence the entire room. This wasn't just an ordinary waiter. His background, his skills, and his determination were about to turn the tables in a way that no one present could have imagined. The laughter from the banquet hall carried like a cruel wave, bouncing off the polished marble walls. The billionaire leaned back in his seat, satisfied with the spectacle he had created. He was a man who had built empires, who believed wealth gave him the power to demean anyone he wished. The crowd, desperate to stay in his good graces, joined. His mockery, some nervously, others boldly. But the young waiter standing before them did not flinch. His expression was steady, his eyes calm, and his posture unshaken. That composure unsettled a few in the room who expected him to shrink, to disappear under the weight of public humiliation. As the waiter moved between the tables, serving drinks and dishes, the whispers began. People muttered about how out of place he looked, questioning why someone like him was working in such a prestigious event. These weren't simply remarks, they were daggers disguised as observations. Each comment revealed the racism and prejudice simmering beneath the polished exterior of the gathering. To many, he was invisible. To others, he was an easy target. Yet what no one realized was that this young man was far from ordinary. Before arriving in Shanghai, he had studied languages passionately, mastering not only English and French, but also Mandarin, a skill few expected of him. He was the son of hard-working parents who instilled in him dignity and strength, even when the world tried to strip it away. He had taken the job as a waiter not because he lacked talent, but because he needed to support his education and family. As the night continued, the billionaire found more opportunities to target him, mocking the way he carried trays, his appearance, and even daring to imitate him. Each cruel jab drew more laughter, but beneath that laughter were uneasy eyes. Some began to wonder how long the young man would tolerate the abuse. The tension built with every insult, every burst of laughter. The humiliation had reached its peak. But the waiter's silence was not weakness. It was the calm before a storm. For deep inside, he knew his moment was coming, and when it arrived, it would leave the entire room speechless. The billionaire, now emboldened by the approving laughter of his guests, raised his glass and delivered one final insult in Mandarin, assuming that no one in the room besides his wealthy peers could understand him. The words were cruel, meant to reduce the young man to nothing more than a servant beneath notice. The hall erupted again, but this time the laughter carried a sharpness, almost daring the waiter to crumble. All eyes fell on him, expecting silence, humiliation, or retreat. Instead, the young man paused. He set down the tray he carried with deliberate calm, his movements steady, his presence suddenly commanding the entire room. The atmosphere shifted, the laughter faltering into uneasy murmurs. He lifted his head and spoke, not in English, not in broken phrases, but in flawless, articulate Mandarin. The first words stunned the audience into silence. His tone was clear, confident, and eloquent, every syllable pronounced with the ease of someone who had studied with passion and respect for the language. The insult the billionaire had thrown at him, he repeated it word for word, then dismantled it with wit and wisdom in the same tongue. His response was sharp but respectful, exposing not only the cruelty of the remark but also the ignorance behind it. Gasps filled the hall. Guests who had laughed moments ago now exchanged glances of embarrassment, some lowering their eyes in shame. The waiter's words carried dignity, a quiet strength that revealed the absurdity of mocking someone based on race or status. More than just language, it was his composure, his refusal to be broken, that left the crowd spellbound. The billionaire, once so smug, sat frozen in his chair, his face drained of color. He had expected an easy target, someone powerless to resist. But now, he was the one exposed, his arrogance dismantled by the very person he had ridiculed. The balance of power had shifted in an instant. In that breathtaking silence, it became clear to everyone present. The waiter was no ordinary man, and the humiliation they had all witnessed no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the billionaire. The fee. Silence stretched across the hall, thick and unshakable, until the sound of one person clapping echoed in the room. Then another, and soon the very guests who had once laughed at the billionaire's cruelty were now applauding the waiter with genuine respect. It wasn't just about his mastery of Mandarin. It was the way he had carried himself with dignity, refusing to meet hatred with hatred, but instead turning prejudice into a moment of undeniable truth. The billionaire shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his wealth and status suddenly meaningless in the face of a young man's intelligence and courage. For the first time, people looked at him not with admiration, but with quiet contempt. His cruel joke had backfired, exposing him as small-minded in a room full of people who had come expecting greatness. As for the waiter, he didn't linger to bask in the applause. He bowed his head politely, retrieved his tray, and returned to his work, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone in the room knew that something extraordinary had happened. His words would be remembered long after the party ended, and his story would spread far beyond those walls. That night, several guests approached him privately, offering opportunities, scholarships, jobs, introductions. They didn't just see him as a waiter anymore. They saw him for who he truly was, a young man of talent, resilience, and vision. And though he accepted nothing immediately, his eyes held a quiet promise that his journey was only beginning. The billionaire, once untouchable, was left facing whispers of ridicule. His arrogance had crumbled in the presence of the very person he thought beneath him. And the truth was undeniable. The man he tried to humiliate had instead revealed the depth of his own ignorance. This moment became more than just a personal triumph. It became a symbol of what happens when someone refuses to bow to prejudice, when intelligence and respect rise above arrogance and hate. So ask yourself this: how many times in history have voices been silenced, mocked, or overlooked, simply because of skin color, class, or status? And how many hidden geniuses remain unnoticed, waiting for their moment to prove that worth cannot be measured by wealth or appearance? If this story of resilience and justice moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that respect is earned not by power, but by character. And remember, true greatness is never in mocking others. It's in uplifting them.